My name is George Whitaker. I'm 80 years old, and before you judge me, before you roll your eyes or click away, let me tell you something. I didn't mean for it to happen. I didn't ask for love. I thought I was done with it. My wife died 11 years ago. We had a beautiful life, 47 years together, 3 children, all grown and gone. One lives in Chicago, one in Seattle, and the youngest somewhere in Florida. I haven't seen them in years. My house is a small white cottage in a forgotten town in Maine, windy, cold, and quiet. I live alone. Most days I sit on the porch, wrapped in my coat, watching the waves crash and thinking about how long I have left. Loneliness at 80 isn't loud. It's not even sad. It's just there, like wallpaper you stop noticing. Then she appeared. Her name is Evelyn, 20 years old. She walked into the library on a Thursday morning, rain falling hard outside. I was reading an old biography of Hemingway, half asleep. She wore a red scarf, jeans, and combat boots. Her hair was messy, wild curls dripping rainwater. She smiled at me. Not a polite smile, a real one, the kind that makes you forget your name. I remember thinking, she must be lost. She wasn't. She sat 2 tables down, pulled out a notebook, started writing furiously. Every few minutes, she'd look up at me, smile again. I looked behind me, thinking she was smiling at someone else. Nope, just me. I went back to my book, heart beating faster than it had in years. The next day she was there again, same table, same notebook, same smile. By the 4th day, she spoke. You always sit in the same spot. I blinked. Habit. You like Hemingway? Not really, I said. I like the idea of him. Drinking in Paris, falling in love, getting his heart broken, writing it all down. She laughed. That's what I'm trying to do, minus the drinking. You're a writer? Trying to be. That's how it started. A few days of talking turned into hours. I learned she was studying literature at a small college nearby. She didn't like dorms, rented a tiny apartment over a bakery, said the smell of bread made her feel safe. I didn't ask why she was alone. She didn't ask why I was. There's something about talking to someone with no expectations, no past between you, just words, stories, silence. Weeks passed. I started waking up early, shaving, combing my hair. I'd walk to the library with a cane and a secret hope she'd be there. She always was. One rainy afternoon, she asked if I wanted coffee. Sure, I said, pretending it wasn't the most exciting thing to happen to me in a decade. We walked to a small cafe, sat by the window. She told me about her favorite poets. I told her about the war. She said I had kind eyes. I told her she had fire in hers. The barista gave us a weird look when we paid together. Evelyn didn't seem to notice or care. I started to notice the looks. On the street, at the diner, at the library. I knew what they saw, a wrinkled old man sitting across from a young, vibrant girl who could have been his granddaughter. But I didn't care, because I was happy. And I was terrified, because something in me was beginning to wake up. Something dangerous. I was falling in love. There's a strange kind of fear that comes with happiness when you're old. I wasn't supposed to feel like this. I was supposed to fade. I was supposed to sit on the porch, drink my tea, and wait politely for death. But Evelyn, she made me feel like I still had chapters left, and that terrified me. One morning, I waited at the library. She didn't show. I tried reading, but the words meant nothing. I waited an hour, then 2. Just before noon, she ran in, breathless. "I'm so sorry," she said. "My bike chain snapped. I had to walk here. I looked at her hands, grease-covered fingers, scraped knuckles. "You could have called," I said, trying not to sound worried. "I don't have your number." That hit me like a freight train. We'd spent weeks talking, hours together, but I'd never once given her my number, because I was afraid it would make things real. I took out a pen, scribbled it on the corner of my Hemingway book, tore it off, and handed it to her. She folded it carefully like it was something sacred. That afternoon, she asked if I wanted to see her apartment. I hesitated, not because I didn't want to, but because I did. Her place was tiny, slanted ceiling, a single window facing the sea, books stacked everywhere, a mattress on the floor, and the smell of fresh bread drifting in from below. She made tea, chamomile. We sat cross-legged on the floor, surrounded by books and crumbs and the quiet hum of an old record player spinning jazz. "Do you believe in soulmates?" she asked. "At my age, I believe in survival," I said. She grinned. "That's not an answer. I think people find each other when they're meant to, but timing's a cruel thing." She stared at me, quiet. Then she leaned forward, close enough that I could smell the rain in her hair, the ink on her fingers. "Do you think it's wrong," she whispered, "that I like being with you?" I wanted to say yes. I wanted to say this was a mistake, but what came out was no. Her eyes searched mine like she was looking for permission. I didn't give it. She didn't need it. She kissed me. It was soft, uncertain, the kind of kiss you don't expect to survive. When it ended, she pulled back just slightly, her forehead against mine. "I don't care what they think," she said. "I like how you see me. Like I'm more than just pretty or young or broken." I swallowed hard. "And you make me forget," I said. "Forget what?" "That I'm old." She smiled. "Good." That night, I didn't sleep. I kept replaying it all. The kiss, the warmth of her teacup, the curve of her smile in candlelight, the way I felt more alive in that single moment than I had in decades. The next day, things changed. She held my hand as we walked into the cafe. People stared. I felt the burn of it, like acid on skin. But she didn't care. She ordered coffee, talked about poetry, told the barista I was the best storyteller in the state. She made me feel like I belonged, like I was worthy of being loved even if the world didn't agree. Later that week, I asked her why. Why me? Why an old man with liver spots and a bum knee? She looked at me, dead serious. "Because you listen, because you see me, because when you laugh, it sounds like truth, because you're not pretending to be cool or dangerous or mysterious. You're just you, and that's rare." I didn't cry, but something inside me broke open. I'd lived 80 years thinking love was something you got once, maybe twice if you were lucky. But here she was, and for the first time, I dared to imagine a future again. A different kind of future, not long maybe, but real, and that scared me more than anything, because I knew sooner or later the world would come for us, and it wouldn't be kind. The whispers started small. A glance too long from the librarian, a subtle pause when the barista handed us our drinks. A neighbor at the grocery store who suddenly remembered she forgot something in aisle 3 the moment she saw us. I tried to ignore it, pretend it wasn't real, but Evelyn wasn't stupid. "They're talking, aren't they?" she asked one day as we walked down the coast. The wind was sharp, biting, but her tone was sharper. "They don't understand," I replied, keeping my gaze on the sand. "That's not what I asked." I stopped walking, took a deep breath. They think it's inappropriate, that I'm taking advantage, that you're confused or trying to prove something." She laughed bitterly. "Let me guess, they think I have daddy issues." I didn't respond. She kicked a rock into the water, hard. It skipped twice, then sank. "I've had enough of men my age," she muttered. "All ego, no depth, no soul. They don't see me. Not really, just a body, a thrill, a phase." She turned to me. "You saw me day one. You didn't even try. That's why I trusted you." I swallowed hard. The cold wind stung my eyes. "I still do," she added softer. "That night I couldn't sleep. What if they were right? What if I was just a shadow she clung to, trying to escape the chaos of her youth? What if she woke up one morning, looked at me, and saw nothing but age and regret? But every time I closed my eyes, I saw her smile, heard her laugh, felt her hand in mine. We weren't doing anything wrong, but in the eyes of the world, perception mattered more than truth. 2 days later, it got worse. I received a letter, typed, no return address, just one sentence. "You should be ashamed of yourself." I sat with it for an hour, the paper trembling in my hand. I didn't show Evelyn, but she knew. The next morning, she found me on the porch, staring into the fog. "Tell me what it said," she demanded. I handed her the letter. She read it once, then tore it in half, then in half again. "Cowards," she spat. "They don't even sign their name." Her fury was beautiful, righteous, but it scared me, not because of her anger, but because I didn't have it in me to fight back any more. "I'm old, Evelyn," I said quietly. "I don't have the strength to battle the world." She knelt in front of me, took my hands in hers. "Then don't," she said. "Let me." I looked into her eyes and saw something I hadn't seen in decades. Fire. Not the reckless kind, the kind that warms, that protects, that refuses to let go. That afternoon, she posted a photo of us on her Instagram, just our hands, clasped on a table next to 2 coffee mugs. The caption read, "Love doesn't ask your opinion." Within an hour, the comments poured in. Some were supportive. Most were not. "She's brainwashed." "He's disgusting." "This is sick. Call the cops." I told her to take it down. She refused. "I'm not hiding," she said, "and you shouldn't either." But I had been hiding from the world, from my children, from the future. And now it was too late, because the story was out, and we were no longer in control of it. 3 days after the photo went viral, I received a phone call I never expected. It was my son, Daniel. We hadn't spoken in over 4 years. "Dad," he said, voice tight, sharp like a blade, "is it true?" I knew exactly what he meant. I stayed silent. "She's 20, Dad. 20? Do you realize how that looks?" "Yes," I said calmly. "Do you realize how it is?" There was a long pause. "You raised me better than this," he said finally, quieter. "You raised me to respect women, to not manipulate them." That word hit harder than I expected. I'm not manipulating anyone. "You're 80. She's the same age as your granddaughter. What are you thinking?" "I'm thinking I feel alive for the first time in a decade." He scoffed. "That's selfish." "Maybe, but it's honest." There was a long silence on the line. Then he said, "She's not in it for the right reasons. You've never even met her." "I don't need to. I've seen enough." And then, just before he hung up, "You've embarrassed all of us." Click. I sat there, phone pressed to my ear long after the call ended. Evelyn came by later with groceries. She was smiling, humming some old Fleetwood Mac song. One look at me, and the tune died on her lips. What happened? Daniel called? Her face fell. What did he say? I didn't answer, just took the bag from her and started unpacking silently. She walked over, touched my arm. Talk to me. I turned to her. I didn't want to, but it all came pouring out. How Daniel had accused me of using her, of being selfish, of dragging our family name through the mud, of being a disgrace. She listened, quietly, then sat down at the kitchen table and stared out the window. He's not entirely wrong, she said after a while. I froze. She looked back at me. But he's not right either. I sat down across from her. This isn't a game to me, I said. I didn't go looking for this. I didn't want to fall for someone your age. She smiled sadly. And I didn't plan on falling for someone older than my grandfather. But here we are. Here we are, she echoed. We sat in silence for a long time. Then she said, let's go away. I blinked. What? Just a weekend. Just us. No phones, no comments, no looks. I stared at her. You're serious? I need to remember why this matters before they convince us it doesn't. We left the next morning, a small cabin 2 hours up the coast, owned by an old friend of mine who owed me a favor. It rained the whole first day. We played chess, cooked pasta, listened to vinyl records, and danced barefoot on the old wooden floor. And at night, we lay in bed, her head on my chest, listening to the wind and each other's breathing. I wish time would stop, she whispered. I wish I had more of it, I replied. The next morning, we made coffee, stood on the porch, and watched the waves crash. And then she asked me a question I hadn't prepared for. Would you marry me? I laughed. Thought she was joking. She wasn't. Her eyes were serious, soft, but sure. You don't have to answer now, she said. But I want you to know, I'm not here for a fling, George. I'm here for the whole damn thing. And for the first time in years, I felt terrified, not of death, but of the possibility of a future. We returned from the cabin on a Monday morning, sun high, air crisp, and hearts full. But the world had not paused in our absence. If anything, it had sharpened its teeth. The moment Evelyn turned her phone back on, her face dropped. Hundreds of notifications, DMs, tags, emails. Someone had leaked our names. The photo of our hands had spread beyond Instagram. Now it was on Twitter, Reddit, even a gossip blog. Some called it a twisted love story. Others, an example of grooming hidden behind poetry and old jazz records. They didn't know us. But they spoke with certainty. That's what the internet does. Worse yet, Evelyn's college found out. 2 days later, she was summoned to a disciplinary hearing. Why? Not for breaking any rules, but because a student's public image reflects on the integrity of the institution. Translation: her love life was bad PR. I waited outside the building while she went in. She came out 40 minutes later, pale and silent. What happened? I asked. They told me if the story doesn't fade, they'll recommend I take a leave of absence. For being in love? For embarrassing them, she said, her voice flat. I clenched my jaw. Hard. We drove back to her apartment in silence. Once inside, she sank onto the mattress and stared at nothing. They didn't care about my grades, she said. Didn't ask about my work. Just wanted to know why I was ruining my future. You're not ruining anything. She didn't respond. Evelyn, we can walk away. She looked up, startled. What do you mean? I mean, I'll step back, quietly. You go live your life, finish school, travel, fall in love with someone easier. She stood, crossed the room in 2 steps, slapped me not hard but enough. "Don't you dare," she said through clenched teeth. "Don't you dare decide what I need." Tears filled her eyes. "I've been invisible my whole life, George. Too weird, too smart, too intense. You're the first person who didn't ask me to shrink. And now that things get hard, you want to disappear?" I looked at her, stunned. She wiped her face roughly. "You want to protect me? Stand beside me, not behind me, not out of frame." And so I did. We stopped hiding, went to the diner, sat outside, held hands. She posted a photo of us laughing in the sunlight. Caption, "Still here." Support started to trickle in. Quiet messages from strangers. A woman in Ohio who said we gave her hope. A retired teacher in Oregon who met her husband at 58 and was called a fool. A young girl in London who wrote, "Thank you for proving love doesn't care about rules." But with the good came more rage. A YouTube channel did a video titled, "Creepy Grandpa Seduces Young Girl. Watch this cult-level manipulation." They played clips from Evelyn's poetry readings, used photos of me with my cane, set dramatic music behind it. The comments were savage. She tried not to read them, but some found their way through. "Hope he dies soon." "She's clearly mentally ill." "Where's her father?" One night, she curled up next to me and whispered, "Why does everyone think love has to look one way?" I didn't have an answer, so I held her tighter and promised we'd write our own version, even if the world never understood. It was a Thursday afternoon when the knock came. Not a polite knock. The kind of knock that says, "I'm not leaving until you open this damn door." Evelyn was in the shower. I opened it. He stood there, tall, square jaw, wrinkles drawn tight by decades of restraint. Gray hair cut military short, eyes like winter steel. "George Whitaker?" he asked. "Yes, I'm Evelyn's father." I didn't speak, just stepped aside. He walked in without asking, surveyed the apartment like a man inspecting damage after a storm. Evelyn came out moments later in a towel, hair dripping, expression shifting from confusion to dread in a heartbeat. "Dad, I got on a plane as soon as I saw that photo," he said, voice cold and sharp. "Why?" "You know damn well why." She crossed her arms. "You haven't called in over a year. Not one birthday, not one visit. But now I'm in love and suddenly you care?" He ignored that, turned to me. "You're 80. She's 20. What in God's name do you think you're doing?" "I'm loving her," I said quietly. He scoffed. "That's not love. That's delusion." Evelyn stepped between us. "Don't talk to him like that." "Are you hearing yourself? You sound brainwashed." "I'm not your little girl anymore, Dad." He turned to her, finally letting the mask slip. "You think this ends well? You think this lasts? He's closer to death than you are to graduation." I flinched, not because it was cruel, but because it was true. And Evelyn knew it too. But she didn't back down. "I know how old he is," she said. "I know what this looks like. But I also know no one's ever made me feel like I matter until him." Her father turned back to me. "You should have said no. Should have told her to walk away." I met his eyes. "I tried." He went silent for a moment, then pulled something from his coat pocket. A plane ticket. "Come home," he said to her. "Just for a few days. Think. Be around people who aren't manipulating you." Evelyn looked torn. She didn't want to go, but she also couldn't ignore the storm she'd dragged into her life. "I'll come," she said, "but not because you order me to. I'll come to prove I'm not afraid of truth, mine or yours." Her father stared at her, then nodded tightly. He left without another word. That night, we didn't say much. She packed a small bag, set it by the door, then crawled into bed and curled into me like a question with no answer. "Do you think I'm doing the right thing?" she whispered. "I think the right thing is never easy," I said. "But if you come back to me, I want it to be because you choose me, not because you need me to save you from them." She cried quietly in the dark, and I held her like I was memorizing the shape of goodbye. The next morning, I drove her to the airport. She kissed me at the terminal, soft, lingering, eyes red but shining. "I'll call when I land." I watched her walk away, and for the first time since we met, I felt completely, utterly alone again. The door to the world had cracked open, and I didn't know if she'd come back through it. The first day without her was quiet, too quiet. The kind of silence that presses against your ribs, that makes clocks tick louder, that turns shadows into memories. I made tea, her favorite kind, chamomile with too much honey. I poured 2 cups by habit, realized it too late, left hers on the counter, didn't drink mine. I walked to the library, sat in our usual spot. The chair across from me was empty, but I kept glancing at it anyway. People stared less now. The online storm had begun to die down. The internet had moved on to a new scandal, a new target. That's what it does. But real silence doesn't fade with the scroll of a feed. It lingers. The second day, I didn't leave the house. I reread the Hemingway book she interrupted the first time we met. I had underlined a sentence months ago, one I barely remembered. "The world breaks everyone, and afterward many are strong at the broken places." I wasn't sure which part of me was broken, or if I wanted to be strong again. The third day, she didn't call. I stared at my phone for hours, checked for signal, volume, battery. Everything was fine, except the silence. By the 5th day, I started convincing myself it had all been a dream, that she was never real, that I'd hallucinated her into existence, a beautiful rebellion against the loneliness that had eaten away at my bones for a decade. But then the doorbell rang. It was the librarian. She brought a small package, no return address, just my name, scribbled in familiar handwriting. Inside was a notebook, her notebook, the one she always carried. A Post-it was stuck to the first page. "I'm not gone, just breathing." Page after page, her writing spilled out. Poems about the sea, thoughts about growing up too fast, sketches of hands mine, always wrinkled, always holding something, and letters, dozens of them, each addressed to you. You make silence feel safe. You once said time was cruel, but I think time is just confused. It doesn't know what to do with people like us. You are not my escape. You are my arrival. I read the whole thing in one sitting, then read it again and again. Somewhere between page 40 and 41, I started to cry. Not the quiet kind, the gasping, shoulder-shaking, heartbreaking kind. Because I knew whatever was happening where she was, it wasn't an ending. It was a pause. She hadn't abandoned me. She was fighting for herself, for us. The 8th day, she finally called. Her voice was hoarse but steady. "Can I come back?" she asked. I wanted to shout yes, but I said, "Only if it's what you want." "I've never been more sure of anything," she said. "But I'm not coming back quietly." I didn't understand what she meant. Not yet. But I would. Because when Evelyn returned, she brought with her more than a suitcase. She brought a decision that would change everything. She arrived on a Sunday. Gray sweater, wind-blown hair, same fire in her eyes. But something was different. She didn't run into my arms. She walked in slowly, measured, like someone who had made peace with a storm. I stood in the doorway, unsure. Then she smiled, and the world clicked back into place. She dropped her bag and walked up to me, took my face in her hands. "I'm home." I kissed her, not desperately, not hungrily, just long enough to remember what it felt like to breathe properly. Then she pulled back and said, "I have to tell you something." I braced myself. "I've been invited to read at a public showcase. Big crowd, professors, journalists, the whole creative writing department." I nodded slowly. "You deserve that. I'm going to read about us." I blinked. "Evelyn?" She shook her head. "Let me finish. I'm not asking permission. I'm telling you because I respect you. I've been hiding my truth behind metaphors and metaphors behind fear. But not anymore." I sat down. "You know what that'll bring," I said. "More hate, more judgment." "Yes," she said, "and maybe more truth." I didn't sleep the night before the event. She did, like a child, curled up beside me with ink on her fingers and calm in her bones. That afternoon, the hall was packed. Students, faculty, cameras, phones raised, whispers echoed through the room when I walked in and sat in the front row. They recognized me. She stepped onto the stage with no notes, no papers, just the notebook I'd read 100 times. And she began. "When I was 16, I thought love was supposed to hurt. When I was 18, I thought it had to look a certain way. But when I turned 20, I met a man who shattered all those rules. He didn't try to impress me. He didn't try to own me. He just saw me." Murmurs ran through the crowd. Evelyn's voice didn't waver. "You've seen his photo. You've judged his wrinkles. You've mocked our story. But let me ask you this. If love isn't about safety, about presence, about truth, then what is it?" She paused. "He didn't steal my youth. He gave it shape. He didn't save me. He stood beside me while I saved myself." There was silence, a heavy, stretched kind of silence. Then someone clapped, then another and another, until the whole room rose, some reluctantly, some defiantly. But they stood. She bowed once, then walked straight to me, still on stage, and extended her hand. I joined her, heart pounding. She took the mic one last time. "This is George. He's 80. I'm 20. And we are not asking for your approval. We're just telling you the truth." She dropped the mic on the table, not in drama, but in peace. We left the stage together, fingers intertwined. Outside, the air smelled like sea salt and spring. That night, we lay on the porch, staring at the stars. "You were brilliant," I whispered. She smiled. "I wasn't brave enough to say it until now." "Say what?" She turned to me, eyes fierce. "That I love you." I didn't respond with words. I just held her. And for the first time, I didn't feel afraid of the future, not because I thought it would be easy, but because I knew we'd face it together. It started with the keys. I couldn't find them one morning. I checked the usual spots. Jacket, kitchen hook, nightstand, nothing. Evelyn found them in the refrigerator. I laughed, brushed it off. "Happens to everyone," I said. She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. A week later, I called her by the wrong name. Not someone I knew, not an ex, just a name that didn't belong to her. She froze. So did I. "I'm sorry," I whispered. She said nothing, just nodded slowly, eyes shimmering. That night, I sat on the porch long after she went to bed. The ocean looked the same, but something in me had shifted. A quiet cracking, not loud, but permanent. The next morning, I visited the doctor. Blood tests, Reflex checks, questions meant to sound casual. He didn't look at me when he spoke. There's some cognitive decline, mild, early stage possibly. I didn't hear the rest, just that one word. Early. I came home and didn't tell her. I couldn't, not yet. Because how do you tell the woman who just stood on stage to defend your love that the clock is now ticking louder? Instead, I cooked her favorite breakfast, burned the toast. We laughed. But inside, I counted the moments. How many more clean ones do I have? How many more mornings where I remember her name without hesitation? How long until I forget what we fought for? A few days later, she found the doctor's note, folded neatly in my coat pocket. She didn't yell, didn't cry, just stood in the doorway holding that piece of paper like it was a verdict. You weren't going to tell me? I didn't want to scare you. You think not knowing is better? I looked down. George, she whispered, you're not a burden. You're my person. I finally met her eyes. I don't want you to waste your youth watching me fade. She stepped forward, placed her hands on my face. Then we won't waste it. She kissed me fiercely, with urgency, like trying to tattoo memory into my bones. That night, she opened her notebook again, wrote for hours. When I asked what she was doing, she said, saving pieces of you in case you forget. The next morning, she gave me a box. Inside were cards. One said, this is Evelyn. You love her. Another said, she makes you tea with too much honey. And another, she stood in front of the world and said, I choose you. I held the cards to my chest. I'm not gone yet, I said. She smiled through tears. I know, but just in case I'll be here, holding the map. Because that's what love does. It doesn't stop the clock. It just walks beside you until the last second ticks. It happened on a Wednesday. Nothing unusual. Morning tea. The sound of rain on the roof. Evelyn humming an old tune in the kitchen. I got up to grab a book. Then everything went black. I woke up in a hospital bed. White walls. Steady beeping. The smell of antiseptic. And her. Sitting beside me, eyes swollen, hands wrapped around mine like she was afraid I might float away. Hey, I croaked. She exhaled like she'd been holding her breath for hours. You scared me. What happened? You fainted, hit your head. Minor concussion. They ran tests. I looked around. How long? 6 hours. I nodded slowly, then asked, what day is it? Wednesday. I paused. And who are you? The silence that followed was heavier than any word. Her hand stiffened in mine. I stared at her. Familiar but unreachable. Like a name I once knew written in fog. Then, just as the panic began to rise, I remembered her smile, that scarf, the notebook. Evelyn. She nodded slowly. I began to cry. I forgot you. Just for a moment, she said gently. You remembered? But what if one day I don't? She leaned in. Then I'll remind you again and again for as long as I can. A nurse came in, checked my vitals, jotted something down, then turned to Evelyn. You're listed as emergency contact. Are you family? She looked at me. I looked at her, and without hesitation she said, I'm his fiancée. The nurse blinked. Congratulations, she said, half surprised. After she left, I turned to Evelyn. Fiancé? I wasn't sure when the right time would be, she said. But now I know. It's now, it's every day, it's before the forgetting. I smiled weakly. Marrying me means watching me disappear in pieces. She took my hand and kissed it. Then I'll collect each piece and keep them safe. That night, she climbed into the hospital bed beside me. We didn't talk, just lay there, heartbeat sinking, breaths weaving into each other. Outside, the rain had stopped. Inside, time slowed again, just for us, and I realized memory is not the only way we stay. Sometimes it's the people who remember us when we don't, the ones who stay when our minds start to wander, who bring us home again, word by word, touch by touch. We didn't plan a big wedding. There were no flower arrangements, no tuxedos, no seating charts with distant cousins we'd never met. We chose the cliff behind my house, the one that faced the sea. Just the two of us, and the waves below, and a minister who didn't blink when he saw the age difference. Evelyn wore a white dress that barely touched her ankles. Simple, linen. She looked like wind and poetry. I wore my best suit, creased, slightly faded, but it still held dignity. She tied one of her old red scarves around my wrist. "For memory," she said, and then she smiled in that way she did when she was holding something fragile but fearless. We invited no one, not because we were ashamed, but because we wanted a moment that belonged only to us. She wrote her own vows. "I vow to love you even when your eyes forget my face. I vow to stay when the world says go. I vow to reread every story we've written in your mind until the letters fade. And even then, I will write you again." I didn't cry, not then. I waited until nightfall, when we lay side by side, rings on our fingers, and I whispered, "You gave me a forever inside a borrowed season." She kissed my chest and said, "No, I gave you mine." The news didn't take long to catch up. Someone posted a photo of us, hands raised against the sun, rings gleaming. The comments returned like vultures. But this time, we didn't care. This time, something was different. Some stood up for us. Strangers. A girl from New York wrote, "They dared to love in a world that flinches at difference. Let them." A hospice nurse messaged, "I've seen people die surrounded by silence. If they found laughter, it's already more than most." Even Evelyn's mother, who hadn't spoken to her in years, sent a card. Just one sentence. "I don't understand it, but I see you're glowing. That's enough for me." Daniel, my son, didn't respond, but he sent a photo from his own wedding decades ago. No caption, just a silent offering. Maybe peace, maybe not. But it was something. We settled into married life like we'd been doing it for years. She read me poems every night. I made her pancakes every morning. Sometimes I burned them. Sometimes I forgot I already made them. She never corrected me, just smiled and ate both. Sometimes I woke up and didn't know what day it was. Sometimes I stared at her for minutes before I remembered why I loved her. But when I did remember, it always felt like falling in love all over again. And she never tired of reminding me. One afternoon, I asked her, "Do you ever regret it?" She turned from her sketchbook, raised an eyebrow. "Which part? The marriage? The scandal? The pancakes?" I chuckled. "The waiting." She looked out the window. "Sometimes. But then I remember, most people wait their whole lives for a love they never find. I found mine early. Even if it leaves early, too, it still counts." I reached for her hand. "How will you remember me?" She squeezed my fingers. "In fragments, in tea, in pencil marks, in the way your laugh broke like thunder on a quiet afternoon." I closed my eyes. "I hope I don't forget that." She kissed my cheek. "I won't let you." It was a Tuesday, the kind of Tuesday that looked like any other. Evelyn was painting by the window. The sea was quiet. A record hummed softly in the background. Billie Holiday, I think. I stepped into the kitchen and forgot why I was there again. I stood still, waiting for the answer to arrive. It didn't. I looked down at my hands. Familiar strangers. When Evelyn walked in minutes later, I looked at her, and I didn't know who she was, not even a flicker, just nothing, not a gap, not confusion, just a pure, terrifying absence. She froze when she saw my face. It must have been obvious. She walked to me slowly, gently, like I was glass. "Hey," she said softly, "it's okay." I didn't speak. I just stared. Her eyes filled with tears. But she didn't panic. She didn't ask if I remembered. She just held my hand, placed it over her heart, and whispered, "It's Evelyn, your wife, and you love me." I blinked. Something shifted. Not quite a memory, more like a shadow of one. A scent, maybe. A warmth. Then slowly I whispered, "Tea. Too much honey?" She smiled, crying now. "Yes," she said, "always too much." I sat down. My legs were trembling. She knelt in front of me, took off her red scarf, and wrapped it gently around my wrist. "Anchor," she said. "You always told me it grounded you." And for a moment, just a flicker, I remembered. The cliff, the vows, her laugh in the wind. But it was gone as quickly as it came. That night, she didn't leave my side. She read me the same poem she had read 100 times. The one I always said reminded me of her, even when I couldn't recall why. "You are not the storm. You are the stillness after. You are not my ending. You are the part where I began again." I slept with her head on my chest, and in that sleep I dreamed of red scarves and sea salt and a porch that never aged. The next morning, Evelyn called a specialist. They talked in hushed tones. Words like progression and mid-stage decline floated in the room like ghosts. I tried not to listen, but I understood. My world was shrinking. Memories were blinking out like stars at dawn. She brought out the box of memory cards again. We made it a ritual. Each morning she'd show me 3. "This is Evelyn. You fell in love at the library." She said yes on a cliff above the ocean. Some days I smiled. Some days I stared blankly. But she never stopped, and neither did I. Because even when I couldn't remember the why, I could still feel the who, her voice, her warmth, the way she said "we" like it was still sacred, like it still belonged to both of us. One evening, we watched the sun melt into the water. I turned to her, suddenly lucid. "What if tomorrow I don't remember your name?" She took my hand. "Then I'll love you loud enough to make it new again." By now, most days were a blur. I still knew my name. I still knew the house, the sea, the porch swing Evelyn had painted pale blue. But I no longer remembered why she cried sometimes when I called her Miss, or why her eyes shined with pain when I asked if she was my nurse. And still, she stayed. She never corrected me harshly. She never reminded me with force. Only stories, gentle ones. Over breakfast she'd say, "You once told me I looked like summer, and I said you looked like Hemingway if he stopped drinking." Or, "Remember the time we danced barefoot on the porch? You called it our wedding rehearsal even though you hated dancing." I didn't remember, but I laughed anyway, and sometimes just for a flicker I almost did. She wore the same perfume every day, soft citrus and old books. She said it helped me feel safe. That scent was the last thing to fade. I believe her. Some nights I woke up scared. Didn't know the room. Didn't know myself. She'd light a candle, bring me tea with too much honey, and whisper, "You're home. You're with me. It's Evelyn." And something in me always softened, even if I couldn't say why. One afternoon, I stood by the window, staring at the sea. Evelyn came behind me, wrapped her arms around my waist. "You okay?" she asked. I didn't answer right away. Then I said, "There's this woman I keep seeing. She smells like lemon and paper. She makes tea like she's casting a spell. And when she smiles, my chest hurts." She was quiet. Then, very softly, "Do you like her?" I nodded. "She feels like home." Her voice broke. "She is." I turned, slowly, looked at her like I was trying to remember something that lived behind a locked door. I touched her face, wrinkles I'd traced 1,000 times, eyes that had watched me fade and stayed anyway. "Will she wait for me?" I asked. Evelyn smiled. Tears slipped down her cheeks. "She's already here." That night, I forgot how to use the fork. The next, I forgot how to walk to the bathroom. And yet, every night I whispered, "Good night, whoever you are." And she always answered, "I'm yours. That's enough." Because sometimes love isn't built on memories. It's built on presence, on showing up again and again, even when the person you love forgets why they loved you, or that they ever did. But your heart remembers, and somehow, so does theirs. Even in the quiet, even in the dark. It was late October. The leaves outside turned copper and gold, swirling gently across the porch where we once danced. The air smelled like wood smoke and salt, and you were sleeping more, not deeply, just fading. Your eyes no longer followed me when I walked in. Sometimes you murmured things, half dream, half memory. Once I heard you whisper, "Red scarf, cliff, sky full of vows." I cried quietly in the kitchen, not from grief, from gratitude, that somewhere in the haze pieces of us still floated. One morning I woke up before you. The room was still, soft, fragile like thin glass. Your breathing was shallow but steady. I made tea, too much honey, wrote a note, folded it carefully, slipped it into the little wooden box you once told me was your favorite. I sat beside you and watched the sunlight creep across your hands. They didn't move much anymore, but they still felt warm. I read you the poem you always loved, the one with the sea and the lighthouse. Halfway through, your fingers twitched. You opened your eyes. For the first time in days, they found mine, clear, present, alive. You didn't say my name, but you smiled, and that smile told me you knew exactly who I was. I leaned close and whispered, "I love you, George Whitaker, in every version of you." You didn't answer, but your hand squeezed mine, a small, certain farewell. You fell asleep soon after and didn't wake up. The funeral was quiet, just how you would have wanted. No speeches, no dramatics, just the sound of waves nearby. I wore the red scarf. The minister asked if I wanted to say a few words. I didn't. Instead, I placed the memory cards inside the casket. All of them. Even the last one, the one I wrote. "You are George. You are loved. You were never forgotten." I kept one card for myself. The first one you gave me. "This is Evelyn. You love her." I do, still do, always will. If you love someone, love them fully. Not because you know it'll last forever, but because you never know when the last time you remember them will be. Don't wait for the right time. Don't wait for the world to approve. Hold their hand while yours still can. Say their name while you still remember, because one day love won't live in memory anymore. It'll live in how deeply you once dared to feel.